So the first part, the calibration, is going to involve making sure that the platen on the underside of the platen is really clean. The other thing too is you got to really keep this surface here very clean. It'll oxidize if you leave water standing on it. So overnight, if there's any water spots, if you put the platen on this, it will cause the platen to move up and down or wobble as it rotates horizontally. So the first time we use the machine, we do a series of calibrations on it, and there's 3 steps to that. The first step involves measuring the vertical runout of the platen as it rotates and watching the vertical runout. So we do that with the yellow-faced Mitutoyo dial indicator with a 2-micron resolution, and this interfaces with an adapter plate. And there's a dovetail here where the 2 components mate together. And so I'm going to raise this about 1/3 or 1/2 an inch above the edge here, and then I rotate the collar until it tightens against the back edge of that, and now this is locked in. So this plate will interface now with the cam lock. So as it is here, if I try to put this in, it touches the platen. So what I'll do is I'll use the vertical adjustment knob to raise the multi-prep arm upward so that I can fit this underneath. Okay. The thing I want to check and make sure of is that there's no load reduction applied here. So it's at 3 right now because the last time we used it we adjusted it to 3. So we're going to back this off, and the little indicator needle will drop down to full. That means full weight of the spindle is being applied here. The other thing we want to make sure is that this thing is not up when we do any of our tests. We want to make sure that this is down. So we'll set the platen speed to 20 RPM and then activate rotation. And sometimes when you have the dial indicator, it'll be crooked or rotated some way. I usually rotate it so that the 100 is down below and the 0 is up above. And then position this about maybe 1 inch, 1.5 inches from the edge, and then slowly lower the arm into the moving platen. And as I get there closely, I'm looking at how close the indicator tip is getting to the platen. And as soon as it makes contact, the needle will rotate clockwise. So as you can see, I've made contact here, and I'm going to go down to 100. And as I'm observing the needle, you can see here we've got about, looks like about 3, maybe 4 microns of runout, which is quite a bit actually. That number should be 2 microns or less. So what that probably means is that I've got something beneath the platen that's keeping it resting flat against the base. So on the bottom side of these platens, there's usually a reference mark if you put it there, or sometimes we put a stamp that aligns with there's this little stamped A in the base, and so usually that's where you want to align those. But again, if you leave the platen on the wheel without cleaning it, sometimes debris can collect on the surfaces and create problems with runout. So I just wipe those down. I'm going to match A up with A, reattach the adapter, and then just start my rotation again. And you can see just by wiping it there, it's barely detectable. If you want to zoom in on that, I don't know if you can see that. So it's barely moving. It's less than a micron probably at that point, and that's really good. That's what you'd like to do. But if you get little particles or oxidation between those 2 surfaces, they get they influence the runout. So sometimes it'll go 20 microns or 25, and that's not good. And the reason that's important is because we're going to adjust this leveling plate here so that the spindle rotates perpendicular to the plane of the wheel. And if the plane of the wheel is constantly shifting, then that vertical orientation is constantly changing as well, and we get funny effects on the sample. So after we verified our platen runout, what we're going to do is we're going to use full rotation on the keypad, and we're going to activate rotation of the spindle. Now when we do this, we have to make sure that the indicator tip remains constantly in contact with the platen. So as you can see here, when it's position 1 inch off the edge, it's going to go off the edge. So there's two ways you can move it over. You can loosen the linkage here on the oscillator and slide it over, or you can just activate. In this case, it won't work. We're going to have to move it physically. Okay. So now you can see during a 360-degree rotation, we make constant contact with the platen. It doesn't have to make contact in the center or in the edge or anywhere, as long as it's on the platen completely, because it's an infinite surface. It's an infinite plane. So we're going to start our calibration by taking a measurement on the right side, or the 3 o'clock position, as we look at the platen and pretend it's a clock face. So this would be the 3 o'clock, or to some people, if north were towards the back, it would be the east position. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust our height so that the indicator face needle indicates against 100. That'll be our reference. And then we rotate it 180 degrees and stop, and then we measure, or we look at the reading here, and you can see it's not even. Now it's off by 6 microns, and that's 6 microns in the contact points. So when your sample size is much smaller, it might relate or translate into a 1 micron variation. But let's get it adjusted so that we're 2 microns or less. So we adjust the screw opposite the plate here, opposite to the direction of where this, or the location of our needle is. And we'll make an adjustment to move that back to 100. And so we're even there. We'll activate our rotation and stop again when it gets to 3, and then we note the position, and we can see we're still maybe 2, maybe 4 microns off. So we'll adjust the vertical adjustment knob back to 100, and then activate rotation again over to the 9 o'clock position, stop, and it looks like it's about 1 micron off. So we can move the video camera over there. Okay, so now we've achieved left to right, and that's what has to be done first. The second part is looking at front to back. So again, we'll activate our rotation, stop, and we'll adjust it to 100, and then activate rotation to the back of the machine. Once we get to the back of the machine, we'll use a mirror to look at the reading here, and it looks like we're about 2 microns off. Again, not bad. In ordinary applications, that would be acceptable. So I'm going to use the mirror. I'm going to adjust the height to get it to 100. Bring it to the front, and looks like it's just 4 off. So I'm going to adjust this screw here until that goes back just a little bit past 100. Reset it, and then activate rotation again around to the back. And we look at that, and we're less than a micron off. So that would be considered adequate for almost 99.9% of all applications. It's not going to get much better than that. The last step to calibration involves adjusting of the micrometer heads, because the last time we used the machine we may have made a tilt correction. That doesn't mean that the fixture is going to be parallel with the wheel. So even though this is perpendicular, these micrometer heads affect this plate. This plate allows for tilt correction to be made doing cross sections. So for this purpose, we're going to use a piece of double-sided tape and the dial indicator, which we're going to separate from the plate, and we use a lapping fixture for this. But first I'm going to position and attach this to the platen so that the dial tip is sort of aligned in this orientation as you see in the video. So once we get the dial into position, we place the fixture, the lapping fixture. We make sure that it's obviously free of any debris or wax. And then we always use the fixture that we calibrate to prepare our samples. So this is attached down onto here. We lower this, and this is a little closer to the edge than I'd like to see it, so I'm going to rotate the platen and move it in a little bit more, and then I'm going to activate full rotation until the pivot pin is aligned with the indicator tip location and the contact point. And that's my starting, that's my reference point, and that's pointed out in the manual. So as we lower the fixture down onto the indicator, eventually it'll make contact and act and move it. So we get it to about 100, and then once we get it there, we start our rotation to our first micrometer head, and you can see here that there's a big tilt made, big tilt correction. So the last time this machine was used, we probably used it to adjust the angular orientation of a sample. This is why you check it before you get started, because you never know where it's going to be. So we'll rotate the micrometer head back so that the indicator needle is to 100, and then we start our rotation again to the next micrometer head, and again make another adjustment until it gets back to 100. And we'll have to do this 2 or 3 times, and then we get to our pivot pin, again adjusting the position to 100, rotating to the first micrometer head, making an adjustment to 100, and again back to 100, and then back to the indicator point. Some final little mini adjustments. It looks like this fixture could be slightly warped, but yeah, something is causing it to be a little off. So we take our lapping fixture and we place it onto the cam lock attachment. We have to make sure that we remove any wax or any debris that may influence the registration of the fixture to the mechanics here. So we tighten this down and then lower it using the vertical adjustment knob. But what we want to do first is we want to align this pivot pin with the little slotted groove in it just right above the contact point, and then we lower it into the indicator needle. Okay, we set a reference point of whatever we like. We can also rotate this if we want to rotate it to 0. We can do that. So we activate our rotation and we stop rotation once the indicator gets directly above or below the point where the first micrometer is. We make a tiny adjustment here to get it back to 0. And then we go to the next one, and you can see it's quite a bit out. It's probably because we made an adjustment the last time we used it, and we just didn't get it back to its original position. And then we go back to our pivot pin. We reestablish our 0. We go to the first micrometer head, and you can see we're just a little bit, not much off though. It usually takes maybe 2 or 3 rotations and a few adjustments just to get this just about perfect. And you can see there we're about maybe a couple microns out. And that's the ultimate position that you want to be in. And now you're ready to start mounting your samples to your fixtures. That's it.